Hello everyone, and welcome back. I've got my book, so shall we begin? In the early days of my use of parent, adult, child, some patients were wary of entering a group, insisting, according to their understanding of traditional treatment methods, that private and repetitious recital of problems was what they had come for. Their position was, I am paying you to listen to me and somehow something will come out of it. This attitude has largely changed because of the good reports of the effectiveness of group treatment. More recently, they are referred directly to the group from outside sources, or they asked to be allowed to enter a group, having heard about such a group from a friend. There is no selection of members for the group according to diagnostic categories, nor are they assigned to groups on the basis of symptomatic similarity, not only because it isn't necessary, but because of the stigmatizing aspects of psychiatric diagnoses. It is not beneficial to put all alcoholics, all homosexuals, or all school dropouts in the same group, since this makes possible the development of the general tenor, doesn't everyone? With the therapist the only odd one out. It's hard to get comfy sometimes doing this, you know, people. Sometimes you itch. Thus, the group may include all standard diagnostic categories, including patients with low intelligence and those lacking in formal schooling. Many self-taught individuals make good transactional analysts. Many of my patients have had the opportunity to see a patient in the group go into and come out of an acute psychotic episode, and the free expression of numerous delusions. In the group, they have observed and heard patients who are actively hallucinating describe the parent-child dialogue that the parent perceived as coming from outside of himself. Nose again. Patients with freed adults are not disturbed by these manifestations of transitory mental disturbance. They tend to be supportive, reassuring and stroking, and to ignore the unusual. Each of my transactional analysis groups meets weekly, except for hospital groups which meet daily. At the end of the hospital stay, the duration of which averages 2 weeks, the patient enters one of the groups in my office. Group members are taught to be alert to the tendency of the child to compare. I am learning faster than you, or you are sicker than I. Therefore, new patients entering a group of old timers seem to feel at ease, and quickly proceed to the business and transactional analysis. The setting for group sessions is comfortable and acoustically perfect. Everything can be heard, including a sigh. Occupying a prominent place in the room is a blackboard, which is used frequently in each session for structural diagrams of the symbolic rendering of important formulations. Some people move rapidly in the acquisition of skill in identifying parent, adult and child, and the way these are involved in current transactions. Others take longer, yet those for whom learning may come more slowly develop the insight in time that their resistance to learning resides in a not okay child that is labouring under an old reality in which the little person was not given permission to think for themselves. The understanding of the existence in oneself of the not okay child is one of the first and most important steps to understanding the basis of behaviour. This marks the beginning of the objective evaluation of one's own personality structure. It is one thing to understand this academically, it is another to comprehend this reality in oneself. For not okay child may be perceived as an interesting idea. My not okay child is real. The content of group transactions is related mostly to the present day problems of the members. What happened yesterday or what happened last week is much more often the point of inquiry than what happened a long time ago. The members learn to identify and know their parent, adult and child by their appearance in the transactions of the present, particularly the transaction in the group itself. This is quite different from the kinds of data we sometimes think of as coming from psychological research. In an address to the American Psychological Association in September 1967, the association's president, Abraham Maslow, asserted his colleagues generally are far too fond of amassing trivial facts under the banner of research. The information they gather is useful, but it tends to be trivial. It tends to be a piling up of little facts. Far too many psychologists do their work on refined studies such as the left quadrant of somebody's eyeball. Are you with me so far, people? I hope you are. The ultimate value of research, whatever its form, lies in the production of information that enables people to change. The change produced in individuals as their adult begins to take charge is rapidly apparent in the group. It also becomes apparent to other members of the family. Not frequently, this may present certain hazards for the individual. A husband whose wife was in one of my groups called to complain. What gives in the group? My wife seems happier, but our marriage is going on the rocks. Do you want to tell them, people, or shall we? Or shall I should say? Because I think we all know what's happening here. In such a case, I invite the spouse in for an individual session to explain the basis of parent, adult, child. The usual outcome is that both husband and wife enter a marriage group. It is almost axiomatic that if one member of the family enters a group and begins to change, the whole family must become involved, because the game pattern has been disturbed. If, for instance, one member of a family is the black sheep and they begin to move out of this role, the role of others, particularly siblings, may become confused, reversed, or otherwise upset. This is the basis for the usually excellent results achieved with conjoint family therapy. In my adolescent groups, the contract calls for equal involvement of the parents. One of the repeated topics for discussion at these group meetings is how to sabotage therapy. Some parents unknowingly undermine the treatment efforts because they really do not want to give up the parent-child relationship which they feel has worked so well in the past. Their position of power is threatened when the adolescent starts operating in the adult, unless the parents are equally adult. The transactions will cross. Okay, let's start this sentence again. Their position of power is threatened when the adolescent starts operating in the adult. Unless the parents are equally adult, though, the transactions will cross. These parents see autonomy of their youngsters as a threat to their control of them and may decide they liked it better the way it was before treatment. Familiar miseries may seem more comfortable to foreign parents than the risk of trusting their teenagers to develop their own inner controls. Group members are encouraged to view their relationships on the outside in a responsible and loving way. Some relationships exist by virtue of games. Stop playing is to end the relationship. This is not always kind or realistic though. If visits to grandmother's house have been structured for the past 20 years by games of the "isn't it awful" variety, it is not necessarily loving to stop visiting grandma because you can no longer stand "ain't it awful." The adult has a choice to play, to not play, to modify the game into something less destructive, or to try to explain the insights that help persons give up games. We cannot, after all, resign from the human race, despite how game-ridden it may be. If we are not to be overcome by evil, then we must overcome evil with good. This we cannot do if we withdraw from all relationships in which games exist. From time to time I refer to the built-in safeguards in parent, adult, child. As I write this, I am confronted with rows of bookshelves loaded with tomes devoted to the general topic of therapy. Much of the content is devoted to repetitious, morbid accounts of so-called mental illness or human misery, with minutely detailed technical discussions of the dangers involved in therapy. Much of this has to do with so-called transference and resistance problems so central to the method of psychoanalysis. Too often these writings dwell on how to protect the therapist rather than how to cure the patient. In psychoanalysis, the analyst is the hero. In transactional analysis, the patient is the hero. The safeguards in parent, adult, child exist in its mutually participant format with a language that forms the basis for the patient and patient to therapist transactions for the meaningless examination of all aspects of behaviour and feelings regardless of their nature. In the parent, adult, child group, the members act as both a restraining and supportive influence to each other. There is nothing of the omnipotent therapist sitting in the dark corner with his poor little patient recumbent before him. Both alert to the dangers in the grim business. One aspect of the parent, adult, child group contract allows and even encourages a child in each member, including the therapist, to come out and laugh. Parent, adult, child groups are characteristically laughing groups with great capacity, in turn to be considerate and supportive with the nurturing parent while looking for new answers with the alert adult. The danger then is the therapist's not knowing, or, for that matter, anyone's not knowing what the "I'm not okay" position in the child can do to a person's own life, and to the lives of others around him. When one member in the group announces, "You hurt my not okay child when I said that," let's start that sentence again, shall we? You hooked my not okay child when you said that. The way is open for the examination of one of the mysteries of her existence, the outcome of which may prove to be exceedingly beneficial to all the members of the group. And that, people, gives us to the end of the chapter. As it's early into the video, people, we shall continue with we shall start chapter 12, which is titled Parent, Adult, Child and Moral Values. It'll just be a little bit of reading, but it just kicks us back into it and makes the video a decent length of time. Because I've always vowed to make these videos a minimum of 14 minutes. Reading videos, that is. You tell your 6-year-old son to go back out there and punch that kid in the nose the way he punched you. Why? You marched in a demonstration protesting the Vietnam War. Why? You gave 1/10 of your income to your church. Why? You do not report your good friend to the Internal Revenue Service, although you know he is guilty of gross tax evasion. Why? You accept responsibility for the mistake of an employee. Why? You are for fair housing laws but forget to vote. Why? You tell your daughter she must stop associating with a certain friend who comes from an undesirable home. Why? You do not report the malpractice of a colleague even though you know people are being harmed. Why? You do not allow your children to watch divorce court, but they may watch the man from Uncle. Why? Ooh, that last one brings up an interesting thing. In that people often pick and choose what they censor from their kids. In the case of this question, I should point out, the divorce court I don't think needs explaining. I've never seen it, but I think we all know what it's about. The Man from Uncle was one of those old spy shows, so it would have involved violence and people getting shot and old men having sex with incredibly beautiful young women. Not always willingly if the old spy films were anything to go by, but it's in the script so it happens. So ask yourself this, you don't want your kids to be exposed to divorce, but you're willing to expose them to sex and violence. Why is that? And bear in mind, this is not a criticism, by the way, okay? Because we all have our morals. We all have our lines somewhere on each issue. Ask yourself, why has society programmed us to accept sex and violence, but not divorce? Think about it. Right, on with the book. Now my little rant is over. Excuse me. Every day most people make decisions of this sort. They are all moral decisions or decisions of right and wrong. Where does the data which goes into these decisions come from though? From the parent, adult and child? After you have examined all of your own parent data, kept some and rejected some, what do you do if you do not feel you have the necessary guards for decision making? Abdicate? Once you have an emancipated adult, what do you do with it? On moral questions, can you figure things out for yourself? Or do you have to go ask an authority? Can we all be moralists? Or is that for very smart and wise people only? If we don't seem to be doing very well, where can we go for new data? Where are we deficient? What kinds of reality can the adult examine? Sorry, I heard a noise then. Turns out it's just a siren of some sort. Reality is our most important treatment tool. Reality, understood through the study of history and the observation of man, is also the tool by which we construct a valid ethical system. We are not reasonable, however, if we assume that the only reality about man is that within our own personal experience or comprehension. Reality for some people is broader than it is for others because they have looked more, lived more, read more, experienced more, and thought more. All reality simply is different from someone else's reality. Now, as we all know, we all see things differently. So, in a way, everybody's reality is different. Our need for direction in the journey through life is similar to the navigational problem of an airline pilot. Pilots in the early days of aviation flew by the seat of their pants. That's trousers for you non-Americans out there. And relied on their vision, comparing what they saw below them, rivers, inlets, railroad tracks and towns with the maps they had spread before them. This of course was unreliable when vision was obstructed, even for a short time. Therefore navigational aids were devised to take a fix on 2 points. The 2 points are special radio stations, each emitting a signal informing him of the compass radio is playing is on in relation to the station. He draws the two radials as lines on his map, and where the two lines cross is where he is. If he took a fix in only one direction, he could not find his location. He might discover he was on the equator, but where on the equator? He would have to look in another direction for data to answer that question. I feel that many psychiatrists and psychologists have been guilty of one fixed treatment, in that they have devoted all their time to looking at only one reality, the past history of the patient, what he did, and largely ignored an examination of the types of reality that might help him understand what he should do. We are hopelessly impoverished to believe that the only realities that concern our mental health have to do with a state of affairs wherein I am so and so because when I was 3 years old, mother hit father with my potty seat on Christmas Eve in Cincinnati. That's a city, by the way, Cincinnati, not, a special name for a special room or anything. No, technically, if you had a special room, you could call it Cincinnati if you wanted to, but it might cause confusion. Archaeology of this kind, though, reminds me of H. Allen Smith's story about the little girl who wrote a thank you note to her grandmother for giving her a book about penguins for Christmas. Dear grandmother, it read, thank you very much for the nice book you sent me for Christmas. This book gives you more information about penguins than I care to have. And that, people, is where our video ends tonight. So, until next time, people, take care of yourselves, alright? Bye.